Hey gang, how's it going? Everyone doing good? 'Cause I'm not. Haha, haha. And now you like me more because I said something relatable. I'd like to mention my inconsistent upload schedule, but no one cares. Reason number 1, I have a chronic illness. And reason number 2, I have severe unmedicated ADHD. Because I already take way too much medication, I don't want to take another one. But that just means I have awful time management skills and spend most of my time doing one thing that I really like and not doing other things that I also like making videos. I'm also lazy, like genuinely, like I am lazy and I'm a perfectionist. I have all these cool ideas in my brain and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, that's such a great idea, like you should do that. And then once I start actually doing it, I realize that there's no way I can do it as good as I have it in my head. So then I don't do it. So I personally see that as a form of perfectionism, and that is 1, why I'm in therapy, and 2, making this video. I called this video The Curse of Creativity, and I know that sounds very dramatic, but you wouldn't have clicked on the video if I said having creative ideas is exhausting sometimes and I can't make it the way I want it to, or creativity is undervalued and underappreciated, and the only time creativity is actually appreciated is when it can bring value to the group. And by value I mean money, because for some reasons things only have value if they can make you money. And that is a problem with our society as a whole, not with being creative. It's an unfortunate byproduct. You feel as though a lot of what you do has no value to it because you can't earn money from it. Or when you are doing something cool and creative, someone's like, you should sell that. You should totally sell that. Like, thanks man. Now that just took all the fun out of it. Now I'm not having fun anymore. Now you're telling me I could do it as a job. And jobs aren't fun. The second something becomes my job, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I'm not having fun anymore. Anyway, this persistent struggle has been stuck in my mind for years. I wouldn't say it's causing my depression. I would say that it is contributing to it. A lot of my perfectionism blocks me from being able to express myself creatively, which is very disheartening a lot of times. Mostly making this video to show, hey, you're not alone in this. This is I feel a very universal feeling. And if you don't have that, then good for you. I will give you a cookie. Just be sure to comment it and say, I don't relate to this, and I will get that cookie sent to you right away. Or a gold star if you want that too. I think back to when this was weighing me down quite persistently, especially in terms of my YouTube videos. I was watching a video about the tortured artist and how the best art is made by those who suffer and by those who are miserable. And as someone who was at one point miserable, I thought to myself, pondered, if you will, how on earth do these tortured artists even have the energy to make the art they're so famous for? I'm trying to organize my thoughts to create a smooth transition. If you were expecting organization, well thought out ideas, and smoothness and consistency, you are in the wrong place. When I use the terms creative or creative person or creativity, I mainly use it to quote a label that was pushed or given to us by peers, as well as a label that we put on ourselves. Honestly, barely know the definition of creative because the way it's defined is not the way that it's used, which is a lot of English words. Use of the word has skyrocketed according to this chart on Google, which seems relatively outdated now. The adjective definition, according to Google, relating or involving the imagination or original ideas, especially in the production of an artistic work. I assume this definition is relatively accurate, but when people say creative, they often mean like I draw a lot. This leads to the other definition, which is actually very helpful, a person that is creative. As a kid, I drew what I saw, and I feel like most people do that. Whether that was something I made up in my head or something I could see with my 2 little child eyeballs, which everyone does. I often get confused when I hear this because it's not like I'm creating something new per se, or like I don't have original ideas. Everything I make is a mismatch of other things I see. Nothing is truly original. My editing style takes inspiration from vloggers such as Lin Trung, whom I've been watching since 2018 and have admired and looked up to. Because of this, so many of my creative ideas regarding my art or editing style can be traced back to them. I've been watching Curtis Connor since the beginning of 2020, right before my country began quarantine. At this point, I was 15 and in my mental development years. And since I was holed up in my room with nothing better to do, I would watch his and many others' YouTube videos to pass the time, like most people did at the time. Because of this, I've picked up on his humor and mannerisms, and specific phrases that I also say. This also concerns my inability to express things the way most people do, so I pick up on the personality of whatever I've fixated on the time. It's hard to say someone is creative because aren't we all just mismatches of each other? Nothing truly unique. I could say that sentence and end the video there and people would pick up what I'm putting down, but that means I don't get to talk for as long as possible, so we will keep going. I know some people want to back it up to social media as the root of every problem in the world. Everything was perfect before those dumb web developers progressed the human race or whatever. Sarcasm aside though, which I hope you understand that I was speaking in sarcasm there. If social media causes problems, I do, and gives those with said issues a platform to express them. Most of our concerns were there before, people just didn't share them, or have the ability to share them. Creativity was always focused on trends, creating a new wave of popularized ideas each century. 1800s was concentrated of ideas of romanticism, realism, and stories about the common man. In the 1900s, people were much more pessimistic. I wonder why. Seeing the new millennium and wary of what would come. I believe the progression of technology in the 1900s also plays a factor. The 1900s also had distinct decades that aren't nearly as discernible in past centuries. The trends were definite, and I believe a lot of that progress was because of several wars outbreaking, technology progressing rapidly to stay ahead of their opponents. You had to write entire novels to get your point across, and it might have only been read by a couple hundred people. Or you could share an idea in a local newspaper and get your whole town of 50 people to see it. I'm exaggerating and hypersimplifying it, but sometimes that's just what you gotta do, you know? Because of the internet, ideas spread like wildfire. Someone could have a random thought, tweet it, and then have thousands of people see it. In this cycle of new quickly becoming old and the internet's constant reward system, trying to keep viewers watching for as long as possible. Trends are made and die out within weeks or even days. I noticed something with our trends where something is extremely popular and then someone will make a TikTok saying, actually, I don't like this trend. Or, ew, remember when we all dressed like this and thought it was cool? Like, yeah, I do remember. It was like a year ago, and it's still cool. It's now unpopular to like it, and your little pea brain can't wrap your head around doing something because you want, and not because it's popular. As someone who wore the indie kid aesthetic after it was popular, I know that people call your fashion ugly when they wore the same thing only a few months prior. Every person has patches of other ideas and sews them together to create something new and unique to them. A quilt. Creativity is a quilt. The internet is a series of tubes. Because we look to others and create our own thing based on them, we may feel unoriginal and discouraged, like I was discussing earlier. Our minds constantly saying, you'll never be like them. Your art will always be last compared to the artists you take inspiration from. I also want to add my own definition of art here. Anything created by a living thing is art. Goofy videos of dogs peeing on electric fences? Art. Traditional art pieces popularized in the Renaissance period? Art. Mummification and the creation of the pyramids? Art. They say, well, what about excrement? Is that art? Living thing created it. Yes. And it's not uncommon for people to use their feces as a medium for their art. Or make statues of it. What is this? What is that? You could say that's crappy art. Haha, I did it. I said the joke, and no one has ever made that joke before. Definitely not the articles that I read up on. Side note, I'd like to say there's no such thing as bad art. Art is subjective, and you did a good job if someone feels something while looking at it. That banana duct taped to a wall? That is art because it made you mad. Living Thing created it, and it also made you super annoyed, which I'm pretty sure is exactly why they made it. That was the point. That was the whole point of it. Everything has been done before, and true creativity doesn't exist. And it's making me feel like a fraud. Notice that people often value a skill if it can make money or progress the economy further, which I did mention earlier. If it doesn't contribute to society, then it is useless, which is a whole other video in itself. That's a very interesting topic, and I plan to pursue it further. So if you're interested, subscribe, even if you make something you enjoy or you're very proud of it, because of how the algorithm works. You have to write down and conform your content to fit the specs of a YouTube video that YouTube likes to push. Think that one tweet about commentary YouTubers and their thumbnails. It's what YouTube drives, and if you spend weeks on a video, you'll want YouTube to see it, right? Mainly if you rely on YouTube for your income. Creating something unique and different, yeah, maybe it will take off, but the likelihood of that happening is slim. It's a gamble, and it might not be something worth taking. It feels as though creativity is not appreciated. Notice one thing go viral, and you have to hop on that train so other people will see your content and hopefully stick around for more. As someone who was always seen as the art kid in school, whenever it came to writing, stories, drawing, or creating traditional art, I was the one people looked out for, and teachers were always excited to see what I might come up with. I'm sure other art kids at school probably understand what I'm talking about. It made me have a lot of pride in my work, but it also gave me a lot of pressure to always be best, which fed my constant perfectionism. Seeing other people get a compliment that I didn't made me extremely jealous, no matter how superficial it seemed. I was also 10, so give me a break. This constant perfectionism has stuck in my brain well into adulthood. But as an 18-year-old, that adulthood hasn't been that long, so I digress. There's a constant comparison between other people's creations, and this weird comparison between the ideas in your head and the actual product. When I tell you, I have so many cool ideas for my YouTube videos, and once I make them, I'm like, man, that is not nearly as good as I wanted it to be. So I don't do anything. If you don't try, you'll never be disappointed. I have an image in my head of how I want my art to look, and then I actually draw it, and I can't copy the original image in my brain, so then I make an angry pencil marks in my sketchbook and have a huge mental block around drawing, and I don't do anything artsy for months. I have days where I have a lot of ideas, but I'm having a flare-up day, so I'm in bed the whole day, or I try to write in my journal, but my hands cramp up and hurt for the rest of the day. Improper blood flow in my fingers, my tremors getting worse. I've noticed that being able to use the resources you have to create is not accessible. Some people just have a better hand in life. Of course, that doesn't mean it's impossible. Thinking on this side of things makes me think of the people that made instruments out of garbage and made an orchestra, which is very impressive. Like, that is so cool. This is something I love about art. People will find ways around their circumstances and still create. It does add an extra step though, and some people have the privilege to develop more quickly. I'm unsure if this is even a point because what I'm saying is fairly obvious. Comparing yourself to people who have more opportunities and privilege can also cause more pressure of perfectionism. But it shouldn't, because you have to understand that you don't suck, you're just poor. You don't suck, you're just poor. I know anything counts as long as it's been made by a living thing, at least in my definition, and there's no such thing as good or bad art. But I think you can understand what I mean by wanting to make good art and having perfectionism. You still have an image in your head of what you want it to look like, so it's still incredibly frustrating when it doesn't look how you want it to. Anyway, who needs a segue when you can just be cut? I always found the concept or the idea of the tortured artist quite cliche. I understand what they mean. Artists suffer from mental health issues as well as physical ailments. Vincent van Gogh, Henry Matisse, Sylvia Plath, Osamu Dazai, Lucy Maud Montgomery, and many others. These are just the ones I can think of at the top of my head, and by the top of my head, I mean as I'm scripting this. These artists have something in common. They deal with mental turmoil. They all have some form of struggle that has made them who they are. Lucy Maud Montgomery had a troubled childhood and didn't end up living the best life, so she wrote happy tales, stories like Anne of Green Gables. Sylvia Plath used her mental health issues to write stories like The Bell Jar or her journals, which I'm not 100% sure if they were intended to be published. Henry Matisse dealt with sickness to the point where he wasn't able to even hold a paintbrush. And so he began creating art through collages, paper that he carefully cut into shape and plastered into beautiful art, which he's become known for, and many of his most famous works are from this era. I like his series of cat paintings, but I think that's just me being a cat lover. Painfully annoying. My cat lover. I love his use of bright colors in his works and how he makes the world look so much more fun than usual. Much of my art was drawn during times of turmoil, and many of my favorite writings were from my worst moments in life. After hearing my examples, I'm sure you're probably thinking that an artist has to go through hard times in order to create the most beautiful work that they can. And it's much less straightforward than that. I've noticed often the art people create when they're happy is overlooked. Following Lucy Maud Montgomery wrote characters such as Anne Shirley, who saw the world uniquely. Imagination ran wild in the way the author describes things, and she goes on long paragraphs to describe a sunset or a forest. My personal opinion, I think there are times when the author notices simple beauty in the world, and she wants us readers to take a step back to see our surroundings. Just take a moment. I know that has been shoved down our throats our entire lives. Just notice the simple things in life. Thinking to one of my favorite plays, Our Town, but I still think it's overlooked or turned into a cliche to the point where no one actually does the thing that's cliche. Like, you can still do it even if it's like cliche, you know? We spend so much time trying to find hidden meanings and messages that we don't take a step back and think, maybe all this is using words to paint an image of a sunset into our minds. The sunset is just a sunset, and it's nice. Hardships in life are something that is easy to relate to. Depression is often experienced, with observations about the world falling apart being something we all find solace in. A way to say, hey, I'm not alone in this. Something I think changes is when a person can put that turmoil into words, beautifully inked onto a page. Read those words and highlight them, put them on one of those TikTok quote slideshows, because we all feel what the author is feeling. There's this sense of unity, a sense of connection. An artist can create beautiful paintings or sketches that can be interpreted in so many ways. Some may find more profound meaning, others may just see it as something pretty to look at, and both are okay. Bob Ross is another example. His art represents peace and serenity in happy little accidents. We can relate to and enjoy his art because the feeling is universal. Making mistakes is something everyone does, and I think showing that good things can bloom from it is comforting for everyone. I'm trying to say that we're all tortured in one way or another, but artists have found a way to perfectly express their emotions through songs, paintings, novels, or journals that we can all find solace in. So yes, the tortured artist is very much a reality, but everyone is tortured. And art is just a way for us all to connect and work through that torture together, sometimes centuries apart. We're connected through shared pain. Alright, enough of that. I'm starting to feel too much. The tortured artist, making art everyone can relate to, often expresses our most profound sadness, making us focus on that a lot more. This eats away at us, and we start to fall apart in due time. But to answer the question, will the artists always suffer? The answer is mixed. I can't say for sure that we'll be able to make the same relatable, meaningful art without a hint of tragedy involved. It's like a scale, you know? Not to get too metaphorical here, but I'm gonna get metaphorical here. You can't have a good thing without knowing what bad things are. There has to be a balance. One could say artists have to suffer to make art that means something, that pushes a boundary. I believe that art is anything, no matter what. Someone will create art another can relate to in some capacity. Repeatedly repeated. There is no such thing as bad art. If it makes you feel something, anything, it's good. And guess what? Sometimes that emotion can be happiness. The artist will suffer because everyone suffers, and the only time for the tortured artist to stop being tortured is if nobody suffered, which is just not gonna happen ever. Like, I'm sorry to break it to you, buddy. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, that makes me very happy. I like making videos and spewing out my thoughts on specific topics. And if someone enjoys listening to what I have to say, it makes me very grateful. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode.